Okay, I'll go ahead and stand up here. We're gonna go ahead and get started. Lexi is on Zoom because she is sick, and so she will be speaking from the speaker over here. Okay. So a couple things before we get started. We do have row cover hoops and cover crop in the back, so folks that are in person can pick them up today. Folks that are on Zoom can pick them up tomorrow from the office between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. We are going to do a garlic distribution, but it's going to be in October instead of today because it's better to plant in October anyways. And we are actually going to do that at our end of the year potluck. So we're going to be having an end of year potluck here at the Memorial Park Community Center on Tuesday, October 4th from 5 to 7 or 6 to 8. Can't quite remember, but I'll send details out in an email. But basically that'll just consist of, anyone can stop by at any time, grab garlic, bring a dish, socialize, that kind of thing. We used to have this before COVID and then it kind of like dissipated throughout COVID and we want to get that back going. So we will do that. Also a little incentive to come is that you can get your garlic there. So this is our last workshop in person. So we will still have our garlic distribution. Folks that haven't turned in blog posts, those will still be due every week until November. And then we also will have harvest totals still due at the end of each month. So September, October, I guess September and October. Yeah. We also will be sending out a end of year survey. So if y'all could fill that out, that's super important for us for our reporting to grow Appalachia, to continue to get funding next year, all those things. So I'll send that up in the follow-up email as well. We also have another program starting, and that is our winter business intensive. This is a beginning farmer training program for beginning farmers that are interested in learning the business side of farming. So that'll be from November through March, every second and fourth Thursday of the month. And that just, I guess, basically you can qualify for 2 TAEP credits and then also learn how to financially support your farm, business planning, marketing, all these things. So if you're interested in maybe taking your garden to a market gardening situation or a small farm, this could be a really great opportunity for you. I did send it out an email, but I'll continue to send out emails. They'll be on our Facebook, registration, all that. So also if you know anybody, please share that with them because we are looking for people. We also have scholarships too. So people that are veteran, minority, or limited resource can qualify for a full scholarship. So email me if that's you, or if you know someone, just tell them to email me. The other two things I just had some questions about. So if you are a first year gardener this year, then you would qualify to become a second year gardener next year. So we have a returning gardener application that we will send out in December. So if you are interested in doing a second year, then that will be sent out in December. And then our new gardener application will open in January. So if you know folks, neighbors or friends or whatever that are interested in the program, just tell them that our new gardener application will open in January and they can find that on Facebook. We'll send out emails, all those things. So yeah, any questions on that? Okay, I will turn it over to Lexi then.
All right, hi everyone, I hope you can hear me. I am sick, mainly with a sore throat, so hopefully I will make it through the end of this PowerPoint. Otherwise, Rosie's gonna have to take over. So last time we talked about fall gardening and cover crops. And so this time I'm gonna talk more about season extension and how it's possible to grow through the fall, late fall and winter and early spring in East Tennessee. So basically season extension means just prolonging the times that plants can survive in the garden using protective materials and techniques. Generally this applies to cold weather growing, but you can also apply it to cool season crops by using shade cloth to grow them into summer, to keep them cooler, and things like lettuce and spinach that don't like a lot of heat, that kind of thing. But we're going to mainly focus on winter gardening this time around. So building structures to protect plants from winter weather and dry winds. So basically low or high tunnels. We'll talk mainly about low tunnels in this, but I will touch on high tunnels a little bit in case folks are interested. And then using a lot of mulch to insulate the soil on plant roots is another technique. And then last time I did talk a lot about choosing the correct varieties to grow in the winter. And then sometimes it just comes down to a matter of luck. If we get, 2 or 3 days, where it hits 0 or something like that this winter, then plants may not survive, and it doesn't matter what you've done. That's just bad luck for that. And I'm going to reference things from the last month's presentation. Rosie should have shared the slides with you, so you can go back and reference that. And then there is a recording up on our YouTube channel that you can access also if you want to kind of look back on that information. So the main tool that we've got, and the one we're handing out, is something called row cover. It's also known as frost cloth. It comes in different grades and thicknesses. And the thicker it is, the more frost protection it's going to provide. And generally companies acknowledge just by putting a higher number on it or a higher grade on it. So, however, the thicker the cloth gets, the less sunlight it's going to be able to penetrate the cloth to get down to your plants. So you don't want to cut off too much sunlight, otherwise things will not grow. So I think a happy medium and something that works for our winters for the most part here in East Tennessee is to go with a 1 ounce grade fabric. So like, for instance, there are 2 companies. Agribon is a popular company, so they have an Agribon 30, and then what we're actually giving out is called GrowGuard. It's the GrowGuard 34, and that is basically their 1 ounce grade fabric. And so what that number basically signifies is that 70% of the light is still able to get to the plant through the fabric. So that is going to cut down on your light a little bit, but it will keep things alive because they're not going to freeze as hard. So this 1 ounce fabric offers 2 to 4 degrees of frost protection on average. So under the cloth, that means summer plants like peppers, tomatoes, if you can get them under there, will survive very light freezes. It's down to 30 degrees Fahrenheit, where they would normally die right at 32. So you do get a couple of degrees of protection. I've definitely kept peppers alive through to December some years. That really is a luck thing, that the weather just doesn't get below about 30. After that point, anything from the summer, anything that's not frost tolerant is going to die once it hits under that. So the frost cloth doesn't prevent things from freezing. I mean, it does offer a couple of degrees of protection, but what it really does is it keeps the plants from desiccating in the wind. So when the cells of the plants freeze, it's really that airflow around them the wind can suck all the water out of the cells of the plants, and that's really what will kill them. It's not really the freezing, it's the desiccation that will kill them. So the cloth basically traps a little bit of humidity under it, and it keeps the wind out so that the cells of the plants don't desiccate. So they freeze, the plants can tolerate the freezing. I talked a little bit last month about how sugar is actually something that plants produce as an antifreeze. So plants will actually get sweeter during the winter because they're producing more sugars in order to prevent the cells from freezing as hard. So the frost cloth prevents them from then drying out. So then they can survive the frost and the thaw cycles. And it does keep things a little bit warmer around the plants so they don't freeze as hard. And then With season extension, it's not really, as long as the plant itself is hardy and tolerant of freezing, it's not the cold that is really going to kill the plant. When we're thinking about season extension, it's actually the trapped heat under the tunnels, especially if you're using plastic and not fabric on your tunnels. That plastic will trap a lot more heat than the fabric will. So if it is 45 degrees outside, it can be in the 90s, you know, under that plastic or under that fabric. So, and if it's, you know, if it gets to be 50 or 60 degrees out, it can, you know, be over 100 inside your tunnel. And that may actually fry your plants more than, so it's actually not taking the fabric off when it gets warm outside that you can kill your plants. That's the quickest way to kill your plants. So you just basically, you have to pay attention to the weather, is what I'm trying to get at. If it is going to be above, say, 40, then you really need to take the covering off of your tunnels, and you need to be, you know, aware of that. Besides row cover, it's also really good to use mulch around the base of the plants, and this can be straw or shredded leaves, grass clippings, whatever you have. And this is going to keep the temperature of the ground more even, so that it freezes slower and it thaws also slower. Because if it freezes very quickly and it thaws very quickly, you can have something called frost heave, which if it heaves too heavily, then the plant may separate from its own roots. It basically just rips the plant in half. Which obviously will kill your plant. So mulch helps even out this temperature, and sort of even and will help protect the plants from heaving. Fabric versus plastic. You can buy both. We're handing out fabric, but you can get plastic if you want. I think the wholesale division of Mize will sell rolls of plastic. You can also get it online from like Johnny's Select Seeds. You really have to buy high quality plastic though if you're going to be using plastic. It needs to be UV resistant greenhouse grade plastic. You can't skimp on this. 6 mil is my preferred grade, and that should last you 2 to 3 years or longer if you really take good care of it. Like I said, plastic will trap more heat than cloth will. So if it gets above 40, you really need to take it off. And you will also need to figure out a way to water or irrigate your plants. Plants need less water in the winter, but they still need some, and they will not get it with the plastic over the tunnels. So you need to also have irrigation. Fabric is more water permeable. So as long as we are getting some rain, then you don't need to worry about a separate irrigation system or watering your rows. You'll have a little more flexibility on warm days. Fabric is generally cheaper. It's easier to double up on fabric. Like if it's going to be really, really cold, you can put a second layer of the fabric over it, whereas that's harder to do with the plastic. And fabric also should give you at least 3 years if you take good care of it. I personally prefer working with fabric just because of the temperature. It's more flexible on the temperature and things. Hoops. So the first part is the fabric. The second part is the structure that you need to build in order to support the fabric. We are providing galvanized wire hoops. They're pretty flexible. They're pretty good for short crops, lettuce, spinach, root vegetables, baby greens, that kind of stuff. Sometimes your kale, broccoli, collards will get a little tall for the hoops. So that's not exactly ideal. We're handing out 7 foot, or I guess it's 7.5 foot wide cloth that'll go over the hoops. If we get a lot of heavy snow, the hoops may get bent. So that's kind of the downside of the system we're using. If you want to make sturdier hoops, you can. Like in this picture, you can put rebar into the ground and then bend 1/2-inch PVC pipe over it, and that'll be a little more sturdy. The PVC is flexible, not as flexible as the wire, but it is sturdier and will handle a little more snow. Whereas with the hoops, you can just drape the cloth over it and kind of weigh it down. I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. With the PVC pipes, it'll work better if you get some kind of clamp to attach the cloth to the PVC pipe. You can buy special clamps, like Johnny's will sell them, that will attach the fabric to the PVC, or you can just rig something yourself. Obviously, this is a little more expensive than these wire hoops, and it can still, the PVC will still, it can shatter if the weight on it is too much, but it definitely will take more than the little wire hoops we're giving out. If you want something super sturdy, you can build hoops out of 1/2-inch EMT conduit, which you can buy from any hardware store basically, or electrical supply store. These things, I don't know what the prices are on these things these days with all the COVID stuff. They used to not be too bad, but we do have a little hoop bender, which is what's in this picture here. If you really want to go this route and make very sturdy permanent hoops and make the investment, we can show you how to use the hoop bender with the conduit you purchase, and you can bend your hoops. You will need this system will not work with the cloth we're giving out. You'll need 10-foot wide cloth, which you can buy on Johnny's. I think Wolf Farm Supply in Abingdon, Virginia may carry it, but you want to call them ahead of time before you drive up there to see. I like these kind of things on raised beds. They just it makes a nice system, and you can screw them into the walls of the raised beds. Otherwise, you have to kind of leverage them into the ground, which can be a little difficult. When you're constructing low tunnels, you want to set your hoops about 4 feet apart. You really don't want them wider than that. And you could do 3 or 4 feet, especially if you're anticipating a lot of snow, which in East Tennessee, we're not necessarily anticipating all that much snow. So I think 4 foot is a decent spacing. And then when you cut the cloth, I think we're handing out, we have 100-foot lengths of cloth that we're handing out. If you know that you're definitely not going to use that much, we also have a few that are just cut to 50 foot. Like if you have a very small garden, you can take one of the 50-foot lengths of fabric, but you'll need to cut it to fit your rows, and just make sure that you cut at least 6 feet on both ends of the cloth to cover the row, because you need to be able to, like you see in these pictures, cover the front and the back end of the hoop. Otherwise, air will still get in there. And then you also need a heavy blunt object to hold the cloth down around the sides of the tunnel. I say blunt because if it has a sharp edge to it, then it may just rip the cloth, cut the cloth and rip it. That you can just use extra T-posts, bricks, sandbags, bags of rocks, whatever. Just make sure that it's not going to rip the fabric. And the tighter you are able to pull the cloth or plastic, the more resistant to snow damage it's going to be. And then if you're looking for fun, creative ideas for low tunnel construction, then you can check out, there's tons of information online. You can look up DIY projects. So I just wanted to show you some different examples of low tunnels, out in a field, on a raised bed, different situations, plastic, cloth. You can kind of just see there's tons of examples of what you can do. You can see bricks, you can see sandbags in here. So just to kind of see what other folks are doing. On a large scale, if you are a farmer or interested in getting in farming, or you live on a farm, even if you're not necessarily in commercial production, there's a program from the NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, where you can actually get a high tunnel like this, and they will cost share 90% of the price of a high tunnel. I forget, it's probably $6,000 or $7,000 that they cost share on one of these things. There are different ways to qualify if you are a beginning farmer, and that just means less than 10 years of filing your Schedule F tax form. then you qualify for that 90% cost share. You do need to have a farm number for your property, which you can get from the Farm Service Agency if you don't have one already. And then basically you just need to call your county NRCS office, which you can look up online, to get started with this program. So this is a farm up in Mountain City, and they grow year round, and they're in zone 5A, I think, 5A or 5B. So it's a zone and a half colder up there, but they still grow 12 months out of the year. And you can see they've got the big high tunnel, and then they've got the low tunnels within the high tunnel. So they're really getting a whole lot of frost protection, and they grow all kinds of stuff year round. It's a pretty neat system they've got going. If you don't, so the high tunnels, I mean, these structures have to be concreted into the ground. They usually have drainage systems to kind of deal with the water. There's sort of a, you know, they have to be on flat ground. So if you don't have a flat area, then you have to do site work to get it level. So there's a lot. Not only, you know, is the structure probably going to be about $7,000 to construct, or for materials plus your labor, you know, there's a lot that goes into constructing a high tunnel on this on this scale. So if that is more than you are willing to invest, there's something called a caterpillar tunnel, which is, you know, less sturdy, because in this example, it's made from PVC pipe. But they're also a lot cheaper to build, and they can be moved around. Like if you need to move it, that's more readily done than with a high tunnel. They're usually tall enough, you know, about 8-ish feet tall, so you can walk under it, and they will cover 3 to 4 rows of crops under it. So, and like I said, you can combine a high tunnel with a low tunnel to get even more frost protection. There's lots and lots of plans for how to build one of these caterpillar tunnels online. If you just Google caterpillar tunnel DIY, lots of stuff will pop up. So this is kind of fun on a garden scale. You could probably construct one of these things for a few $100 and get a lot of really good frost protection. Questions so far?
Do you want to do on Zoom first, or
Do what?
are you answering one on Zoom?
I see one that said I turned my garden into an ant home. What's it called? There's borax is a pretty good ant killer. I think you could probably sprinkle that around your garden, around the leaves, and that might help with the ants. And it's non-toxic to humans.
Okay, we have a couple in-person questions as well.
My
Ashley?
question about when moving the tunnels off of the fabric, off of the rows. If we have to leave early in the morning and it's still 30, 31 degrees, but we know it can get enough 40, 45. I'm guessing still the best option is to take that off first thing in the morning when it's still that cold, or just vent on the ends to get it better ventilation. Your recommendation?
Yeah, I caught most of that. You're basically just asking if it's still really cold in the morning, but it's going to get warmer as the day goes on. Yeah, once the sun's out, you should be able to take off the fabric. You know, do it kind of
like
last thing.
If you're going to work or something, like,
Yeah.
what are the best ways to ventilate?
Yeah, you could just take it off. Like last thing as you're going to work. Just run out and take it off, you know, as late as you can. Did that answer the question? I didn't hear all of it.
No, that did answer, yeah. That's it, thank you.
And Felicia, I am going to talk about when to dig sweet potatoes in just a minute. Other questions?
I don't understand how you use these in a raised, like a small bed, because they're not wide enough. Can I use the ones that are being provided, or do I need to have a bigger hoop? Because it's a 10x4. But
Yeah, they may not, they're not, they might not cover the full 10, or the full 4 foot wide area. You can probably rig something, with double rows of hoops and just kind of drape the cloth over it. As best you can, but you may want to use the EMT, especially you've made an investment in a raised bed. You can make an investment in some of these hoops with the EMT conduit, and then kind of attach them to the side of the bed, and you'll get kind of little mini greenhouses basically out of it, or little mini, tunnels. But you can just kind of rig it for this year as best you can, because they're not really going to fit. One hoop's not going to stretch to 4 foot wide, unfortunately.
thank you.
Other questions?
I don't think so.
All right. Okay, garlic. Because we are going to hand out garlic next month. It's ideal to plant it in early October. It's fairly forgiving though if you don't get it into the ground until November or early December. It will still grow, but really you want to get it in October. I think we're giving out ½ pound each of seed garlic, and that'll produce 2 to 3 pounds of harvestable garlic. It's very easy. I totally recommend it. That ½ pound is going to grow a good amount of garlic for you. And we are purchasing certified disease-free seed garlic. You can technically replant garlic that you saved from the previous year. You can technically plant garlic that you buy from the grocery store. However, that stuff's not guaranteed to be disease-free, and it can spread to the rest of your crop and kill it. And there is a lot of issues more recently with garlic diseases. So I recommend sticking to, stuff that you purchase for garlic propagation, rather than trying to replant garlic. Or if you do have the stuff we're giving out and you also want to try replanting other garlic to keep them separated so they aren't spreading disease to each other. So your garlic will come in heads, but you need to break it apart into individual cloves. Don't peel them. Keep that papery skin on each clove. And inspect each clove for any brown spots or anything that looks soft or just doesn't look, absolutely healthy. You really just want the best looking cloves to go in the ground. If you are saving, replanting garlic that you've saved, or that maybe you're purchasing from the store, what you can do is to soak the cloves overnight in a solution of 1 gallon of water plus 1 teaspoon of baking soda. And then right before you plant them, dunk them into some isopropyl alcohol. Don't let them soak in that, just kind of dunk them and take them out and plant them. And that can help a little, and that can help control disease. It's not perfect, but it can certainly help. And you want to plant your garlic 4 to 6 inches apart in rows that are 6 inches apart. And basically, I like to go down the row, put a tape measure out, and then go down the row and just poke holes into the soil so that I can come back around and then just plop each clove into a hole rather than doing it at the same time. It just goes a little faster. As in this picture, plant the clove pointy side up with the flat side facing down into the soil. Okay, don't flip them upside down, because that flat side is where the roots are going to come out and the plant's going to come out the pointy end. So make sure they're in the right direction. And then just gently fill in the dirt over the holes with a garden rake or something and kind of pat it down. And then put a lot of mulch on it. You probably want a good 6 inches of straw, shredded leaves, grass clippings, whatever. Garlic does not need to go under the row cover. It is very cold hardy, but the mulch actually will help insulate the soil and prevent the ground from frost heaving. So garlic's very sensitive to frost heaving. So like I said, if the ground freezes and it heaves, then the garlic may get separated from its root system and it will kill it. So mulching will help even out the ground temperature. You want to keep it well weeded, especially when we're getting into the late spring. Garlic does not compete well with weeds. We are providing what's called a hardneck garlic. There's hardneck and softneck and elephant garlic. So we're providing hardneck garlic. Hardneck produces escape, which is kind of like a flower bud, but not exactly. And it will pop out the scapes in June or so. And you want to cut these off because it helps the plant put more energy into the bulb when you cut off the scapes. And you can also use the scapes. They're totally edible. You can make pesto. They kind of have a nice garlicky flavor to them. And then the scapes, once you cut the scapes, you have about 2 weeks before you'll need to harvest the garlic. We'll send out more information in June to really kind of cover this. You don't need to remember that now, and then we'll send out information how to cure the garlic too. If it's been cured properly, then you should probably get, at least 5 months out of it. Especially the hardnecks garlic varieties tend to store pretty well. So you can grow a good amount of your yearly supply of garlic. All right, sweet potato. Was there any questions about garlic? We'll provide more information about harvesting in June. When you harvest artichokes, when there is a flower bud, before the flower starts blooming, I guess, basically. They're kind of hard to grow because they need a really long season. So if it freezes early, you may not get any artichokes, unfortunately. Oh, Kitty asked if their second year they didn't get the first round of garlic info. You should have still gotten an email though, Kitty. You can also email us in June if you want, and we'll send that information to you because you won't be on the email list and we probably won't remember, but you're welcome, more than welcome to email us and ask us questions about it when the time comes. Okay. Any more questions?
I don't think so.
Great. Oh, did I just? Yeah. Okay. Sweet potato harvest. September is a good time to harvest your sweet potatoes. They are perennial, a tropical perennial. So they will technically keep growing until the frost kills them. However, freezing will ruin the tubers. So you don't want to actually wait for it to frost before you harvest them. So the longer you wait, the more they will keep growing. And the bigger your harvest will be, but you really have to keep a close eye on the weather to make, once we get into October, to make sure that it does not freeze. Because I think our average first frost date is like October 15th or 20th or something like that. Although I feel like it's actually later than that, but that's technically what it is. And it's always possible to get a frost that's earlier than that. So you really got to keep an eye on the weather if you're trying to push it. And I get this question every year. What you dig up from the ground will not necessarily look like what you see sitting on the supermarket shelves. Okay, when you buy sweet potatoes, those are grade A sweet potatoes, and they're graded and they all look the same. Some of them will look like that, and some of them will be 4-pound honkers the size of your head, and some of them will be tiny and weirdly shaped. They're all totally edible. They just don't look like what you get at the supermarket necessarily. This is a 4-pound sweet potato that I'm holding. This picture was definitely way before I had children. Probably 7 or 8 years ago, but that was a very large sweet potato. How do I turn this? There we go. So basically you use a garden fork to dig them up. You want to start about a foot from, you want to cut off the vines, and the leaves of the sweet potatoes are totally edible too. You can treat them like spinach. if you want to try that out. They're pretty tasty. You can cook them, saute them, stew them, that kind of stuff. But you need to get in there, and I like to cut the vines away so I can really see where the base of the plant is. And then you want to back up about a foot from the base of the plant and use a garden fork to leverage up the soil. Be very careful. You don't want to spear the sweet potatoes with your garden fork, but you want to get in there and just kind of gently leverage the soil up so you can see what the tubers look like. Most of the tubers will be at the base of the plant, but if you had really prolific vines and lots of kind of bare soil for them to root in, they will have produced roots. And if they produce them early enough in the year, those roots will have additional sweet potatoes in them. So just if you have a vine that's attached to the soil away from the base, just kind of poke around in there with your digging fork or shovel and see if there's another sweet potato in there. Some years I get tons and tons of sweet potatoes off the vines, and some years I don't. So do check. You may not have anything, but there could be lots. So sweet potatoes really need to be cured. If you eat them immediately after digging them up, they do not taste like much. They're not very sweet. So they need a few weeks to curing to really develop that sweetness that we associate with sweet potatoes. They'll be pretty good even if you just let them sit for a few weeks and before you eat them. Ideally, you want to cure them in a dark location that is 85 degrees with 85% humidity, for about a week. This, I know, is not easy to do at a home scale. I would suggest maybe starting with a basement bathroom with, a little space heater and a humidifier, and just trying to see, as best you can to get that curing process going. But again, you don't necessarily need to do that to still have pretty good sweet potatoes. I would just wait 3 or 4 weeks before you eat them. Optimal storage is at 60 degrees with 85% humidity. Do not store them at temperatures less than 50 degrees or the tubers will be damaged. Again, this is a tropical plant. But really, you can do all that to get, the kind of optimal flavor off your sweet potatoes. But most years just keep them in a crate in my dining room with cardboard over them, and I get probably at least 4 or 5 months of storage out of them fine, and they taste great. With storage crops, I do want to emphasize, and this was with pumpkin, squash, any kind of root vegetables, don't wait to eat them. Don't save them for January, because they may not be any good by then. Quality starts to go downhill after 3 or 4 months. Certain varieties have been bred to go for 5 or 6 months. Most quote unquote storage crops, really about 4 months, they start to go downhill. So just eat them. Don't save them for later. Start eating these crops, as soon as you can, and get the most out of them. All right. Any questions on sweet potatoes or any storage stuff? If you don't have a garden fork, you can use a shovel.
Frost.
But I would also recommend, I have found garden forks at flea markets, or poke around. You should probably find one for $10, because it's a really useful tool to have, not just for sweet potatoes, but any kind of root vegetable, or even aerating the soil. The garden fork is good. If you're planning to can the sweet potatoes, yeah, I would really let them cure that 4 weeks. Otherwise, they're really just not that sweet when they come out of the ground. They're just kind of bland, and they really need 3 or 4 weeks to get that sugar. If you can do the 85 degrees with the 85% humidity, they'll cure in about a week. So it's a little faster. But they'll kind of do it on their own in 3 or 4 weeks, as long as they're kind of in a warmer environment, in your 75 degree house or whatever, 70 degree house. What other questions?
I don't think so.
Okay. So just to wrap up some fall chores, as we're kind of winding down for the season, with the summer season, when you want to start cleaning out any dead or dying crops, weed as thoroughly as you can. Sow cover crops anywhere that you are not growing fall or winter crops, or mulch or tarp, with you can do as much shredded leaves or grass clippings as you can get, or just lay down a black plastic tarp. I think tarping is probably not the most ideal, but if that's what you have the energy for, then go ahead and do that. Just as you don't want bare soil basically. So whatever you need to do to prevent that, whatever you have the energy or the time for, do that. Just don't let it go bare over the winter. Please don't let your weeds go to seed as best you can. A lot of these weeds are getting, their seed heads are maturing and they're going to start dropping those seeds. So things like lamb's quarters and pigweed, each plant can produce 100,000 seeds. And they've tested some of these things, and those seeds are viable for decades. So the more plants you have dropping that many seeds, that's just more and more weeds that you're going to be dealing with, in coming years. So try your best to just get rid of the weeds, or at least prevent them from going to seed as much as you can. Clean up plant material from your garden, especially nightshades. So that's tomatoes, peppers, potatoes, eggplant, that kind of stuff. When those plants, they just, there's a lot of disease, that family has a lot of diseases. And so you want to just get them out of your garden. You don't want them to kind of compost in the garden, because that can just put that disease material back into the soil, and it can pop up next in future years. So getting them out, and trashing or burning them is probably your best bet, unless you have a really active compost pile and you're turning it regularly, oxygenating it, and you're monitoring the temperature and making sure that it gets above 140 degrees to kill the disease. Otherwise, if you put diseased plant material into your compost and you're not actively managing it, then it just kind of rots down, but that disease is still in the material. And if you put it on your garden next year, you're just spreading the disease around. A lot of people don't manage their compost piles very well. And so they're just putting weed seeds and diseases into their compost and then moving that back into their garden in future years. So I like to say, if your compost is not kind of a pain in the butt, then you're probably not doing it correctly. But that's just kind of my 2 cents on compost. So as we get into the fall and winter, take some time to clean and organize your garden tools. Most garden tools will benefit from being sharpened and oiled every year. If you've never done this before, you can find some great YouTube videos on it. Just Google it. And, a lot of these tools, and especially the ones that we've handed out, properly cared for, can last a lifetime. Take some time to sit down and review the garden plans that you made in the spring. Make notes about what actually happened, because if you followed your garden plan 100%, I would be very, very surprised. Just, write down what did differently, what did well, what died immediately, what never germinated, what you liked, what you want to try next year. Just write all that down, because, 6 months from now, when you go to start your spring garden, you're not going to remember this. And then go online and sign up for seed catalogs, because a lot of those start arriving in December and January, and it's really dark and cold. But then seed catalogs start showing up in your mailbox, and it's very exciting to just start dreaming about spring. So I recommend signing up for as many as you can. And I think that is everything. So are there any kind of final questions? And then I will let Rosie get on with the distribution. We're giving out the row cover, which I've talked about now, and cover crop seed, which if you missed or you want a refresher, just look back at last month's workshop for all that info on the cover crops. I think we're giving out 2 pounds, right, Rosie?
2 pounds, yeah.
2 pounds. want to say that's enough to cover like a 500 square foot garden. So if you have a smaller garden, kind of spread them accordingly. If you have a bigger garden, check in with us after we've given everything out. And if we have extra, we could probably hook you up.
We do have a few questions in person, so go ahead, Joel.
But,
Speak
cardboard-
loud.
Hmm?
Speak loud.
Can cardboard be used as well as a cover?
Yeah, cardboard. I would use that in combination with mulch,
Okay,
just so it doesn't blow away.
So not necessarily related to this, I wanted to wait till the end. How do you kill crabgrass? Because it's everywhere.
How do you kill crabgrass?
Crabgrass.
Like,
Is it actually crabgrass or is it Bermuda?
I don't know, it's like one thing and then it just like spirals everywhere and it is taking over everything and I want to kill it.
Because crabgrass is pretty easy to pull out, but Bermuda is not. Bermuda is really bad names. Bad names.
So is there like
Um,
an option for that where it can kill it all?
Is there like a nuclear option or to kill it all or what?
well, the nuclear option is Roundup, but really good tarping for at least 6 months may work. And then creating barriers so that it doesn't get back into the garden, once you take the tarp up, can help. So like using landscape fabric strategically around the edge, so you've got like a 4-foot barrier in between the grass and your garden can help once you get it out. But if it's Bermuda, it's got those rhizomes, and I mean you can dig and you can dig and you can dig. Bermuda and Johnson grass both. You could just, they're horrible. They're really hard to deal with. But if it's crabgrass, then you can just pull it up. It should yank out pretty easily.
Okay, George?
So I'm wondering about in the spring, to tarp the cover crop. And so actually I tarped it, but it was so long, I had to cut it with a weed eater and then kind of raked it off. Do you want to try to work that in there, or just try to just get rid of what was?
Weed eating and then tarping for 3 weeks is what I recommend. And then no, you don't have to incorporate it in. You can basically just treat it as mulch at that point. Whatever is dying and left over, that residue. If you're transplanting like tomato plants and that kind of thing, you can put that directly into the residue. If you're planting seeds, like big seeds like squash and peas and corn, you can also probably just plant directly into the residue. They're big enough to come up. For smaller seeds like lettuce, spinach, carrots, that kind of stuff, you're gonna have to clear it out of the planting area. Either rake it out or till it in or something, just to give those seeds, the smaller seeds, a chance to grow.
Thank you.
Jewel?
Which type of mulch is the best?
What was that? Oh, which type of mulch?
So when I talk about mulch in the garden, I generally mean like straw and chopped leaves, shredded leaves, grass clippings, that kind of stuff that's going to decompose. If you have wood chips, they need to sit for at least a year before you want to apply them, because they are too high in carbon, and they will actually suck nitrogen out of the soil. So which they're fine in pathways because they may help prevent weeds from growing. But yeah, when I talk about mulch, it's stuff that decomposes a little faster than wood chips.
Okay, thanks.
Heather?
So I have 2 clarifying questions. One is about the when to pull sweet potatoes. So I understand before the first frost, but you also mentioned September is good. So can we pull them now if we, like I have some I can see are quite big and
Yeah, you can pull them now. They will just continue to grow through until the frost basically, but you can pull them at now up until frost, yeah.
Okay. The other question is about the cover crops. Are we using, do you protect cover crops? Like, so are we using the covers for those
No.
or just we're eating?
No. So this is a mix of, what's in this one, Rosie? What did you wind up
It's
buying?
daikon radish, rye, winter pea, and crimson.
Clover, yeah. So the rye will survive anything. And the winter pea and the crimson clover are also pretty frost hardy. So they'll continue to grow through the winter. The daikon radish, it's really ideal if you can plant the cover crop in September. And that's mainly for the daikon radish to give it time to get up to size before it freezes, because it is not very frost hardy, and it's supposed to do that though. So it's supposed to get fairly big. It breaks up compaction in the soil, and then it freezes and dies, and just kind of rots and creates all this nice organic matter in your garden. It's fine if you plant it into October or November. You're just not going to get the full benefits of this mix if you can plant it in September and let it grow. But no, you don't need to put the hoops over it. It is designed to just grow without any kind of protection.
Okay, thank you.
Ashley?
So with that question, I have parts of my garden that I'm cleaning up and weeds have grown up, and my plan was to tarp it and then for long enough to kill it and then take it back and put the rope, cover top back. But what you said about September, I don't have time for all that.
Yeah.
Do you recommend a good way to move forward with that? What should we? Just weed
Yeah,
whack?
September is just the ideal time to plant it, but that rye will grow. I mean, if you plant the rye in December or January, that rye will grow, it will germinate. So you will still get some benefit whenever you plant it. You just will get the most benefit the earlier you can plant it, starting in September. So if you tarped it, if you mowed the weeds down and tarped it now, you could probably sow it in October and still get a pretty good amount of benefit out of it.
Thank you.
So for the cover crops, are you planting those for the sole purpose of them just keeping the soil from compacting?
I didn't hear that. What?
She's asking if the sole purpose of planting cover crops is for them dying and going back into the soil.
Basically, yeah. They're for soil health purposes, yeah. They will help reduce compaction, they will add nutrients to the soil, and they'll help prevent erosion of nutrients from the soil. You know, when it's bare soil in the winter, especially, you can get a lot of erosion.
One more thing, for the garlic, when we plant that, are we adding the fertilizer when we plant that, or just?
Are we adding fertilizer when we plant garlic?
If you kind of had poor yields in your garden, if things just didn't grow well, first off, I would get a soil test because you may have a pH problem. But if things were kind of puny, yeah, I would probably fertilize. Or if you're putting it, you know, in a place where you had corn or some kind of heavy feeder, you might want to fertilize it but for the most part, garlic, you know, being a root crop, basically, you don't need to add, you probably should not add too much nitrogen to it. So you could add a little bit of fertilizer, but it's not totally necessary. Christy asked if cover crops can just be sprinkled on the surface, and yeah, absolutely they can. I like to just kind of sprinkle them out and then kind of go through with the flat end of a garden rake and just kind of tamp them in so there's good contact with the soil. And I especially like to time it if it's going to rain, which it is raining a lot. So to just do it right before it rains, tamp it into so it's pressed onto the soil surface. And then once it rains, that rye especially will germinate pretty quickly.
Earlene,
I planted some asparagus, and I know I'm not supposed to get any this first year. Do I need to mulch that, cover it, anything?
did you hear that?
Yeah, you can apply like nice compost to your asparagus bed. It will appreciate that. I don't necessarily think it needs to be mulched for winter protection, but it would be nice mulching like for like to prevent weeds from germinating in the spring. That might be nice for your asparagus bed. But in terms of winter protection, I don't think so. It should be fine.
Do cover crops pretty much grow where planted, or do they spread? Because I'm just curious about planting the garlic in the same bed. Are they gonna overrun anything here?
You don't want to mix them together, but if they're in like, if the garlic's in one half of the bed and the cover crop's in the other half, they will not spread. The only issue you can run into is if you let them go to seed, like if you don't kill them in the like early summer by May, if you don't kill them by May, they will set seed and then can become kind of weedy if they reseed themselves in your garden, but otherwise, no, they won't spread.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Doesn't look like it.
All right. I made it through this workshop sponsored by the amount of honey I just guzzled. So, all right. Thank you all and have a good night.
Thank you.